Today we turn our attention to Psalm 4, which is very closely related to Psalm 3. They follow similar themes. And if you've ever wondered how the book of Psalms was put together, well, it's compiled rather like a modern hymn book. Certain psalms would be left out, others would be put in. In a modern hymn book, often the hymns are arranged alphabetically. In the older hymn books, they tended to be arranged thematically, so that you could pick out songs that related to communion or a worship service. And when I rearrange CDs, say, and DVDs in my house, I rearrange them alphabetically. But when I look at my books, I arrange them thematically, because I want to go to a section of my library where the children's books are to be found, or the detective novels are, or my Bible commentaries, or my history books, or my art books, or whatever it is. So I arrange them thematically, and that's what's happened here with this Psalter, this psalm book, this song book of the Hebrews. So Psalms 3 and 4 are very closely linked. When we last looked at this, we read Psalm 3, and I want to read some words from that again, because they're very similar to what we're going to find in Psalm 4. Lord, how many are my foes? How many rise up against me? Many are saying of me, God will not deliver him. But you, Lord, are a shield around me, my glory, the one who lifts my head high. I call out to the Lord, and he answers me. From his holy mountain I lie down and sleep. I wake again because the Lord sustains me. From the Lord comes deliverance. May your blessing be on your people. Now, when we turn to Psalm 4, we find that a number of those themes are coming out again. And it may well have been that these two psalms were put next to each other because they reflected the same thematic concerns of the worshipper. Some people think that Psalm 4 really is an agricultural hymn, and it might be. We'll pick that up as we go along. Others have suggested that Psalm 3 is intended to say a morning prayer, and Psalm 4 as an evening prayer. We'll see. When we look at Psalm 4, we begin to hear David speaking to God. He says, "Answer me when I call to you, my righteous God. Give me relief from my distress. Have mercy on me and hear my prayer." And in the previous one, he is saying, he answers me from his holy mountain. So David has faith that God will answer when he calls out to him. David is again in trouble. And he says, "O Lord, hear my prayer." Now, you might have sung that beautiful piece that's come out of the Taizé community. "O Lord, hear my prayer." And you continue to repeat the words, "O Lord, hear my prayer. When I call, answer me. O Lord, hear my prayer. O Lord, hear my prayer. Come and listen to me." And it seems to me that that particular piece is written off the back of Psalm 4. God is righteous, says David. And that doesn't mean that he's necessarily good. It means that he's faithful. You can depend upon him. The character of God is unchanging. It's immutable. When you go to God, you find the same God time after time after time. It's not like running to the heathen, the pagan gods, who are quixotic and mercurial, and you never know whether they're going to be angry or happy or asleep or something like that. God doesn't change. God is righteous. God is faithful. God is to be trusted. The second part of the psalm, verses 2 and 3, David is speaking to the enemies of God and to his enemies. "How long will you people turn my glory into shame? How long will you love delusions and seek false gods? Know that the Lord has set apart his faithful servant for himself. The Lord hears when I call to him." And one alternative translation of "know that the Lord has set apart his faithful servant for himself" reads, "Yahweh has made wonderful his love to me." Beautiful expression, lovely translation that. If we're speaking here about David's glory, how long will you people turn my glory into shame? Then it's his position as king which is being upbraided and mocked as with Absalom wanting to take over. If the glory, however, as it can be translated, is a reference to the glorious one, God himself, then they're mocking God. And either way, they're mocking God. Whether they're mocking God's chosen king or whether they're mocking God, how long will you people turn my glory into shame? These people are mocking God. How long will you love delusions or lies and seek false gods? They seek false gods, the gods of the nations. They're surrounded by other gods, the other nations, the Canaanites and Philistines. There are different people who surround them who have gods of their own. In today's world, the gods are gods of fame and fortune and celebrity, and the gods of fingers crossed, as though that would do anything other than give you arthritis. And here we find that David asserts that God has set him apart as king, and God hears his prayer. And David is saying to the enemies of God, these false idols, these false gods, they can't hear your prayer. Isaiah has a wonderful passage, doesn't he, where a man cuts down a tree, burns half of it for fuel on his fire, and then carves a statue out of it and bows down to it. And, you know, the ridiculous idea that somehow these false gods are able to save us or help us. When we turn to verses 4 and 5, it could be that David's responding and speaking out to his friends, or maybe people who are worshippers of God but have a very weak faith, or people who are vacillated, who can't make their mind up whether God is God, whether the gods of the nations are the ones to be trusted. Remember, all of this can be seen within an agricultural context. So it could be that these are harvest prayers, people asking God, and if the God, Yahweh, doesn't turn up with the rain, you turn to Baal and ask him, the thunder god, the husband god, the father god of the Canaanites, to bring the rain for them. We hear, in your anger, do not sin. So David is berating these people. When you are on your bed, search your hearts and be silent. Offer the sacrifices of the righteous. Trust in the Lord. Many, Lord, are asking, who will bring us prosperity? In your anger, do not sin, can be translated, tremble in dread, but do not sin. Paul picks this up in the book of Ephesians, doesn't he? And he says to the believers, be angry, but do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your anger. And I remember my parents always saying that they lived by that if there'd been any kind of a disagreement, and there were so few, but if there was any kind of a disagreement, they would sort it out before they lay down to sleep. David, on the other hand, sleeps on it, makes his decisions in the morning. Perhaps either is good advice. But it says here that it's good to be silent. And sometimes that's the best thing. Sometimes we rave and we fulminate and we shout and we rage against God, but there are times to be silent and to think. The book of Lamentations chapter 3 says that it's good to be silent and to reflect and to listen to God. Interestingly here, where it sort of says, offer the sacrifices of the righteous, when you are on your bed, search your hearts and be silent. The beds could be a reference to fertility sacrifices to Baal, as can the new wine, which comes in the next section. Psalm 50 has this ridiculous idea that somehow God needs feeding, and all the sacrifices are feeding him because he has a voracious appetite. Isaiah 57 makes this particularly plain. You might like to read verses 7 and 8 for yourself, where clearly there are fertility rites going on in worship of the god Moloch. But in Hosea 7 and 14 we read, they do not cry out to me from their hearts, but wail upon their beds. They gather together for grain and new wine, but turn away from me. Many are asking, says David, many, Lord, are asking, who will bring us prosperity? And these people, these vacillators, these half-hearted ones, don't know whether to turn to God or whether to turn to the gods of the nations. David's friends are prone to follow the way of the world, to rationalise. I wonder whether you've ever been tempted to do the lottery, as though somehow that would bring you happiness, and you give yourself to the gods of fortune, as though somehow by speculating that God will bless you. Some people, I've even heard people say, well, if God really wants me to be blessed, he'll make me win the lottery. Well, I'm sorry, that's absolute nonsense. God will bless you, but he might want to bless you with lots of money. You might find that money is a curse. They said to Rockefeller, the richest man of his time, how much more would make you happy? And he said, just a little bit more. Finally, we read the last 2.5 verses. Let the light of your face shine upon us. That reminds us of the Aaronic blessing. Return to that in a moment. Fill my heart with joy when their grain and new wine abound. That might be better translated. You have filled my heart with more joy than when their grain and new wine abound. And that's very much a reference to Baal. And then in peace I will lie down and sleep. For you alone, Lord, make me dwell in safety. Men's hearts are failing them for fear. We are liable to fear in the midst of a crisis. We are in the midst of this unprecedented crisis. How many times have you heard that word used? And yet God knows what is going on. God is still in control. And you won't solve the problem by going to anybody other than God. Yes, by all means, look for a vaccine. But what is to stop another strain of this coming back the following year? Or a different strain of some other disease? We're constantly in a world where we're struggling with disease because of sin. All this sickness and sin and death comes about from the Garden of Eden and Adam's disobedience and our choice to walk away from God. So yes, by all means, look for scientific answers to this. But ultimately, the only answer really lies with God. God is the one who brings blessing. Material blessings never really satisfy. Only God. And while they are celebrating their pagan rituals in this psalm, David is saying, you have filled my heart with more joy than when their new wine and grain abound. And so David, as in Psalm 3, lies down to rest in peace, because only God brings true safety. So may I give you the full Aaronic blessing on this occasion. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord turn his face towards you and give you peace.